EPSI presents Knowledge Series.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Very warm good evening to Professor Kumar and a very warm welcome to this program of EPSI. My name is Sanjay Sharvastav and I am presently working with Mano Rachna International Institute of Research and Studies. It's a deemed university. And this is my second term as a Vice Chancellor, and I also look after Mano Rachna Group of Education. We have 12 schools pan-India. I look after all these schools as Managing Director of the group. And very happy to interact with you on some of the issues related to NEP. Professor Kumar, to begin with, we have seen this education policy which has come after 34 years or so. And in these 34 years, if we see from the perspective of a country like ours, it is rewriting the canvas of education. What would be your first-hand comment about this new education policy? And with the same breath, if I say that for the first time in my memory, I have heard that our president of the country, prime minister of the country, education minister, all of them, they propagated and talked about it. And I have heard our prime minister saying in one of the conclave where all the VCs were there, I'm sure you must be there. You have heard him saying that when we talk about education policy, when we talk about defense policy, it is not related to a party policy. It is seen on the national canvas. It is a national policy. So, Professor Kumar, what would be your first take on this national education policy? Over to you.
First of all, thank you for inviting me to be part of this conversation. There are two things that we need to look at. One is, how are we going to make our country a self-reliant country? That is our primary objective. And two, if you look at globally, where are we going to place ourselves? Obviously, as we have heard from the Prime Minister, that we are working towards making our country Atmanirbhar Bharat. And globally also, we would like to be a global hub for services and products, not only serving our own domestic market, but also international markets. And if these two goals have to be achieved, it is very important that we reform our education. And our education has to become more accessible, and there should be greater equity, and it has to be holistic and multidisciplinary. And that is what the national education policy aims at. I am very glad that in independent India, we are seeing for the first time such a holistic national education policy.
Thank you so much, Professor Kumar, for your first-hand comment. And of course, if we have to be a Atmanirbhar Bharat, and if we have to look our education in totality, perhaps from 1968 to 86, this is the first policy which is totally indigenous in nature. Right. Now, sir, looking at the scenario at global level, your university is one of the top performer when it comes to our country per se. But when we look at the global picture and when we look at the global ranking, as a country, as Indian universities, we are not faring that well. What could be the probable reasons from your point of view, and how this national education policy will help bridging this gap?
For some time, I have been saying that this global university rankings, they try to measure the quality of a university by simply assigning a number. The universities are much more complex than what these ranking organizations measure. The universities are supposed to provide high quality education. They are supposed to make the students lifelong learners, and also make sure that the students who pass out of these universities, they contribute to the societal welfare. That is one aspect. The other aspect is that in a country like India, we have students coming from different sections of the society, especially those students who come from the socially and economically disadvantaged sections. We need to take care of their interests too. So therefore, uh, we have universities which are more equitable and which are socially conscious. On the other hand, education has become a commodity in many of the Western countries, in developed countries. As a result, when they try to measure the quality or the contribution of a university, they measure those parameters. And that is the reason why I have been arguing for some time that as a country, India should have its own ranking system. And that is and as a in 2016, the Ministry of Human Resource Development, it started what is known as the National Institutional Ranking Framework. And if you see the parameters on which the National Institutional Ranking Framework rates our universities, they are more relevant to our country. So the reason why our universities do not find in the world rankings is because of this mismatch between what we are doing our country and what they are doing in their countries in terms of the education. So therefore, I think while it is good that if our universities come in the top ranks of the world rankings, I think what we should be focusing is how to make our education more accessible, how to improve the quality of education in our educational organizations. We should be focusing on building a world-class educational system rather than hankering for coming in the top 100 of the world university rankings. If we set our base, our foundation right, and if we focus on building a world-class educational system in our educational institutes, from among these institutes, the world-class institutes will emerge. And I'm sure that with the implementation of the national education policy, as the research culture, the research ecosystem, and the learning teaching processes improve in our universities, I'm sure many of them will come in the world university rankings sooner or later.
Thank you, Professor Kumar, for such an elaborate and precise answer. Academic reputation, or when we talk about perceptual component, the perceptual mapping and the perceptual reputation of an academic institution plays a very, very important role. Like if you go back to QS or Times Higher Education, if you look at these, or Shanghai, they talk more about academic reputation of a system. So when we talk at global level, why we do not fare that well when it comes to academic reputation of our universities?
You see, first of all, giving a significant weightage for perception in the world ranking universities itself is a wrong approach. In most world university ranking systems, they have nearly 40 or 50% weightage for the perception. And perception is something, it is influenced by several factors. That is the reason why in NIRF, we have given a weightage of only about 10% for perception. And if you look at the contribution made by our students across the world, it is very, very recognizable. You go to any of the the companies which are working on advanced technology, or if you go to any major universities, you have students who have received the primary education, their undergraduate or postgraduate education in India. So therefore, the quality of education that we are imparting at the undergraduate or postgraduate level is indeed world class in India. It is just that the ranking systems do not recognize this because they focus more on perception. And in addition to perception, you see, they also put a lot of weightage on citations. The citations is another very, very narrow area because giving too much of importance to citation can affect the ranking. If you have a university like JNU, it is primarily based on social sciences and humanities. We do have science departments which are doing very well, but then you don't see a lot of citations for work done in humanities and social sciences. So if you give weightage, a significant weightage for citations, then universities like JNU will not find their place in the world rankings. While our individual departments are doing very well, it could be Center for Studies in Sociology or School of Environmental Sciences. The individual units do very well in the world rankings, but as a comprehensive university, we don't find our place because there is too much of emphasis on citations, there is too much of emphasis on perception, and they look for, do you have a lot of endowment funds in the university? Do you have Nobel laureates in your university? That is the reason why I am saying that the world ranking organizations have to be flexible. They need to look at the conditions under which the Indian universities are working and appropriately change the weightage for the parameters. Otherwise, I think the world university ranking organizations, they are not measuring the performance of the universities in the appropriate way. That is my opinion.
If I have understood you right, then the global ranking framework is designed in such a way, in such a manner, that it should be suiting to their way of understanding, their comprehension, and their setup, while our NIRF is far more comprehensive and complete when we talk about the ranking framework. What is your comment on this?
Sure. For example, you see most of these world university ranking organizations, they look for whether we have international students in our university. They also look for if you have undergraduate programs. You see, in many of the top ranking universities, the students who come in the undergraduate programs are the source of resources, source of income for these universities. Education is very, very expensive in many of these top ranked universities in the world. On the other hand, in a university like JNU, we do not have many undergraduate programs. We have just a BA in languages, and recently we have started a School of Engineering program in the university, and that is true of many other universities too, which are very good in other areas. So what these world ranking universities do is they also try to influence your own academic programs in the university, instead of recognizing the intrinsic strengths that the universities already have. And this is where I have an objection when we talk about the world ranking organizations, world university ranking organizations. They should measure the performance of the university considering the conditions under which these universities are working, instead of using one fits all measure and then try to say that some universities are bad and some universities are outstanding. For example, if you take a parameter, how many of the universities in the West will match with the kind of affirmative actions that we are taking in order to reach out to the students who come from the socially and economically disadvantaged sections? None of those universities will measure up to the kind of contribution that our universities are making. So that is the reason why I am saying that the world university rankings are not measuring the universities in India in a comprehensive manner, and they need to change that. And several times when we had meetings with them, we did mention to them that you cannot be so rigid in your parameters. You need to be flexible, and you need to consider the conditions under which the other universities are functioning.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kumar. In fact, I have also taught to many universities across the globe. But when we talk about inclusiveness in totality, perhaps what you have said, we are far more ahead than those Western world universities. Now, I'm taking you back to the same point which you have raised about research framework of our country. Is there a direct connection of R&D spending of India with the research performance of Indian universities? What is your first-hand comment on this? And when you are commenting on Indian universities, please include private universities also, because I come from a private university. Education Promotion Society also works in a way to promote private education institution so that they can serve for the nation building. So on R&D front, R&D spending and research performance of Indian universities, what would be your first-hand comment?
I have a couple of comments to share here. If you look at the research funding that comes to the universities in the West, most of this funding comes from the industries, and they work on cutting edge technologies, and this research is then converted into products, and that is how there is a good collaboration between industries and universities. In India, a lot of our funding comes mostly from the government funding. And for too long, I think industries have remained away from the educational institutes in terms of supporting our research. Now, you need to look back to the 70s and 80s to see why this has happened. See, in 70s and 80s, we had a closed economy, and we had almost no foreign investment in the country, and we gave the entire domestic market on a platter to our domestic industries. As a result, there was absolutely no incentive for the domestic industries to climb up on the technological ladder. On the other hand, if you look at the advanced countries, even small countries like South Korea, Taiwan, and Singapore, they invested heavily in improving the technology in their own countries, and they have become self-reliant. And as a result, the industries have become very competitive there, and in order to remain competitive, they had to do research, and they started collaborating with the academic institutions. On the other hand, in India, we lost that opportunity. We lost the third industrial revolution, because there was no incentive for our manufacturers, for our industries to participate in research, to invest in research. I think today, with the new educational policy and also with the Industry 4.0 coming up, there is huge opportunity for the industry in India to invest in research in the universities. For example, if you look at artificial intelligence, or if you look at electric vehicles, or you have things like pharma and biotech, battery manufacturing, solar power, solar photovoltaic systems. There are large number of areas where our industry can actually invest in research, collaborate with the universities, and then do world-class research. On the other hand, I think the universities also have to collaborate. They have to take the first step and go and meet the industry and talk to them about their needs. See, it has to be two ways. It cannot, industry cannot think that universities have to come forward, and universities should not think that industries have to come forward. They both need to get together, identify the technologies that are required within the country, and the technologies in which we can become global leaders, and we have to work together. And the only way that is possible is if industries come forward and invest in the universities. The second area where universities can contribute is in the area of defense research. We need to modernize our defense sector. We need to develop many technologies for our own security. And this is where the local industries, the defense sector, and the universities have to come forward and strengthen the research activities in the country.
Thank you, Professor Kumar, for such a lucid answer. But the point which you have made, I am connecting the dots, that the bus which we have missed of third industrial revolution, which you have rightly mentioned, Against the backdrop of this national education policy, do you have some hope, or do you feel that the bus which we have missed, we are going to catch it in times to come?
I think for too long we were only thinking about catching up with the rest of the world. And that is how we missed the third industrial revolution. Today, India is known as a global power in software engineering. India has the greatest advantage in terms of the youth power. We have a thriving democracy in our country. Our constitution is the strongest constitution in the recent past in the post-colonial world. We have many positive things. I think we should no longer think in terms of catching up with the rest of the world. We should think in terms of becoming leaders in technology, and the rest of the world should follow us. And that is why I am mentioning some of the areas, the pharmaceuticals, the biotechnology, artificial intelligence, even aircraft manufacturing, UAVs. These are areas where battery technology, where we can become leaders in the world rather than just catching up. So I see that the national education policy, with its holistic and multidisciplinary approach, I'm sure the research ecosystem in the universities spread across the in the country will change dramatically. And with a focus on research, I'm sure we will become world leaders in developing new technologies.
Thank you so much. You have rightly said that leadership is not about the new rules of the game, but rather a way of life. So, coming back to the national education policy, it talks about the NRF with an annual fund of rupees 20,000 crores. How early you see that NRF is expected to start its work? What is your take on this?
We have some centers of excellence in the country. You have certain research labs, institutes like IITs and IISc, and some of the central universities, which are top-ranked universities, where world-class research is being done. But that is not enough for a country like ours. We have hundreds of universities, be the state universities or the private universities. And then it is these universities which are catering to the needs, the educational needs of millions of students. And unless we improve the research ecosystem in the state universities and the private universities which are spread across the country, we will not be able to become a technological leader in the world. And that is the purpose with which the National Research Fund is going to be created. The primary idea is that inculcate this research ecosystem right from the beginning. For example, the National Education Policy talks about making our undergraduate program a 4 years program. Now, those students who have the aptitude for research can actually focus on research in the 4th year itself. So right from the young age, if you can train them in research, when they come to the higher education in the master's and in the PhD program, they have an opportunity to become outstanding researchers. That is one aspect. The second aspect is that the national education policy also gives a lot of importance in promoting both the educational standards and research in private universities. Please be aware that the educational needs of India in the coming 10 years, 20 years, and 30 years cannot be met only by the state and central government. Central government funded central universities. We need to encourage private universities to grow both in terms of their educational standards and the research performance. I'm sure that the NRF, the establishment NRF, will go a long way in improving the ecosystem in the university system across the country.
Very nice, very nice. Now, when we are talking about, we are moving to the next aspect after research is gross enrollment ratio. And if you look at the new policy, which aims for universalization of education from preschool to secondary level, with 100% GER in school education system by 2030, which aims to raise GER in higher education to 50% by 2025. Do you think it is possible? And if yes, then what would be the progress review indicators and specific goals to achieve this target?
Right. You mentioned three components. One is the school education and the GER related to the school education. And then we have the higher education. And the third most important component that the national education policy talks about is the adult education. We would like to achieve 100% literacy among the adults of the country. And in both the school education and the higher education, we have set for ourselves a GER goal of about 50% by 2035. This may sound ambitious, but we need to be ambitious. Ours is a country where we have this demographic advantage of the youth power, and we need to be ambitious. Now, looking at the GER targets that we have set for ourselves, whether it is possible to achieve them, first of all, you need to look at the reasons why we are not able to achieve higher GER. Currently, it is around 26.8% or so in the country. Now, if you look at the reason why about 30% of the students drop out from the school education, it is because of the financial reasons, or it is because of the family situation. Now, the national education policy likes to make our school education and also the higher education as flexible as possible. If a student drops out of the school because of the family or financial reasons, the student can again come back and pick up where she has left and continue the education. Now, this flexibility is very, very important, especially to help those students who come from the economically and socially disadvantaged sections, because it is these students who drop out for various reasons. And then if we are able to encourage these students to remain within the school education system, there is a greater chance that many of them will move on to the higher educational systems. Now, how do you encourage them to remain within the school educational system at the school stage? Well, the NEP looks at establishing good infrastructure in the schools, and then establishing alternative educational centers involving both the volunteers who will come and give a helping hand to the students, and also take help from the NGOs who work in the educational system. The point is that we need to encourage our students to remain within the educational system until +2, so that a large number of them can come to the higher educational system. Now, even if they come to the higher educational system, we need to ensure that they don't drop out. And that is where the academic credit bank comes very, very handy. The students who are financially in need of support, they can actually take courses from different universities, accumulate these credits in the academic credit bank, and then once they get the required number of credits in a very flexible mode, they will get their degree. Now, national education policy has ensured that enough flexibility is introduced into both the school education and the higher education, so that a large number of students will remain in as part of these institutions. And that is one way to increase the gross enrollment ratio. The other thing that the national education policy focuses on is the digital education and the online education. And there is a lot of technology injection that will happen in the higher educational institutes in order to offer online degrees, and that will, in this mode, we are not asking the student, you come to the university to get your degree, to get your knowledge and skills, We are saying that we will bring the education to your doorsteps, and at your own convenience, you gain the skills and the knowledge and become a vehicle for the social transformation.
Thank you so much for such a comprehensive answer. And yes, the 50% GR by 2035 in higher education, if we work on these issues, it will be a reality, undoubtedly. Now, going back to some critical question, because we are entering in the last phase of our interview, there has been a positive response to national education policy at national level, because most of the states are giving lots of support to national education policy. But education being the concurrent subject, it is also a matter of state choice how much they have to support this policy. But still, educationists are apprehensive about the likely time taken in the implementation of it. What is your opinion on this apprehension?
This is where I have said on several occasions that at least the higher educational institutes should take the first step. If you carefully look at the national education policy, there are several things in NEP which do not require any funding. They require only attitudinal change. For example, if you want to make the evaluation process more meaningful by testing critical thinking, by testing the ability of the students to apply their knowledge in practical situations, and so on, instead of testing only the rote learning by the students, this is something that the universities can immediately do. And also, you see, to reach out to the society, we need to convert our research into prototypes and then applications. What stops the universities, for example, in encouraging their own students and faculty members in establishing startup companies? This is not only good for providing service to the society, but it can also bring revenue to the university. So there are several such aspects in NEP which can be implemented by the universities themselves. And of course, there are other things such as forming the Higher Education Commission of India with these 4 verticals, which only the government can do. And the government is working on various aspects of NEP, where, for example, the parliament concurrence is required, where certain gazette notifications and ordinances have to be formed. The government is already working on those aspects. And my feeling is that in next 6 to 1 year or so, some aspects of NEP will be rolled out. And in the couple of years, many aspects of the NEP will be rolled out. But remember that the NEP, for seeing the results of NEP and for implementing the NEP completely in its true sense, it will take some time. And this is where both the stakeholders, which are you and me, educators, and the students and educational institutes, the state government and the central government, we had to work hand in hand. And that is the reason why when the Prime Minister was speaking in a conference to the governors of the states, he said that there are going to be large-scale consultations with the stakeholders at every stage, and we had to work together to implement the NEP. And I'm very, very hopeful that it will happen in a very short time.
What could be the probable reason for those apprehensions, if you can throw some light on that?
What kind of apprehensions do they have?
They think that it is going to be very difficult when it comes to implementation of this policy.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, right. I'm not sure why we need to be apprehensive right in the beginning. For any policy to be implemented, the first step that we need to do is communicate well to the stakeholders so that they understand the benefits of the policy. And that part has already been done before the national education policy was drafted. and after the national education policy was announced, there have been large-scale consultations, there have been several discussions across the country, and the stakeholders now feel that it is their education policy, it is not something that is imposed from top to down. So once we have that sense of feeling that it is our national education policy, then we also feel responsible that it has to be implemented. And yes, some of the apprehensions may come because any policy, if there is no continuity from the previous policies, is bound to fail. But if you look at the current national education policy, it has in many areas it has a continuity in terms of providing equity, providing better access, improving the quality of education and research our institutes. So I do not see any apprehension why anybody should feel apprehension in terms of implementing the national education policy.
Very much. I think this message will reach to many educational institutions across the country, and your message is loud and clear. And I am sure that we will all work together to make a difference when it comes to this new national education policy.
Right.
I'm coming back to the last two questions for you. And this question, because one part of your life you lived in IIT Delhi, you have seen a different world. Now you are in Jawaharlal Nehru University, a different world altogether. Now, when we are talking about the startup Make in India initiatives and this national education policy, how markets and employment opportunities by the implementation of national education policy will play a crucial role for Atmanirbhar Bharat. What is your comment on this?
There are two things here. One point that I wanted to bring to your notice is the emphasis in NEP on vocational training.
Yes.
For too long, we have neglected vocational training. Somehow we have given a second-class treatment to vocational training. But NEP says that the vocational training will be introduced right from the school education. The students will get trained at least one or two or even more vocational trainings. That is number one. If you look at the contribution to our GDP, the service sector contributes about 54% or so, and the manufacturing sector contributes about 27%, and the agriculture sector contributes about 16% or so. Now, in the service sector, who are the persons who are working? It is the welders, it is the plumbers, it is the drivers, and all kinds of people who provide these services. And unfortunately, less than 5% of them actually receive a professional vocational training. And most of them, they learn either through their relatives or working in some shop as an assistant and so on. So we need to give a lot of importance to this vocational training, because a person who is vocationally trained, professionally trained, has a lot of job opportunities. That is number one. Number two, in niche areas, nobody is going to give us technologies. Ultimately, we need to develop those technologies ourselves. And this is where the national education policy emphasizes on creating such teaching learning processes within the university, which will improve the higher order cognitive skills of the students, such as critical thinking, such as ability to question what they are learning, and ability to synthesize information that they get from different sources, and use all this knowledge to find solutions to practical problems or the challenges that our society is facing. So if we can transform our education in this manner, I'm sure we will produce students, not just only those who are looking for a job, but we will produce students who will ultimately become job creators. So in this context, therefore, I say repeatedly that the universities have to come forward and encourage our students to become entrepreneurs, to become innovators, and that is the only way we can create a Atmanirbhar Bharat.
Thank you so much. Now, Professor Kumar, I come back to my last question of the evening, and thank you so much for giving such a candid and straight from heart kind of answers from you, which I could sense as a fellow academician. Coming back to your university, and some of the premier central universities like JNU have been performing well in NIRF from past 5 years or so.
Right.
What should be done to make them world class? Or do you think they are world class but not given enough hype which they deserve? What would be your concluding comment?
Right. We of course have many things to do within our own university system to improve these standards, and that is the reason why we have come up with the NEP. One and a couple of things that we need to do in our universities are opening up our universities to more international students, and that needs to be done in on a greater scale. And then we also need to open up our universities for appointing faculty members from across the world. In olden days, we had scholars coming to our country and living here and studying in universities like Nalanda and Takshila. I think we need to open up. The second thing that the NEP talks about is inviting the international universities to our country. And this is another good thing that is going to happen, because the NEP is very clear that once we bring those world-class universities to our country, there is going to be a healthy competition between our Indian universities and those international universities which are going to come. That is the first thing that will happen. And the second thing that will happen is that if we bring international students and international faculty to our universities, I'm sure it will provide a better global view to our students, a better world perspective for our students, which will help them in becoming great leaders, great educators, and great research of future India. So therefore, I think universities like JNU and other universities which are highly ranked in the country, they need to take some of these initiatives and open up their universities and also compete with other better universities in order to become recognized universities in the world.
EPSI is one of the premier society, education promotion society of India, and they are also connected with all the top decision makers when it comes to policy making. And the role of EPSI is absolutely significant when it comes to education. On behalf of the office bearers of EPSI and its executive secretary, and my personal behalf, thank you so much for giving such a fascinating and simple interview to all our viewers across the country and globe.